All right, welcome folks. Looks like we got a handful of people on the line and we're at about 11 o'clock, so I'm going to dig in. This is Jeff Morissette, Director of the North Central Climate Science Center. We've got Geneva Chung, I know, is on the line as well, who's helping formulate these LCC liaison positions. People could look at the participants to see who else, if they are wondering who else is on the line, you should be able to see that. And we will record this session. If you talk to anybody else who's interested and was not able to make it, we will post this on the North Central Climate Science Center's website under the calendar where we post events, and then the recordings from those events, so it'll be there. Let me just ask before I dig in if there's any questions. You should be able to see on the WebEx the title that we're soliciting for USGS Liaisons between the NCCSC and the LCCs. If anybody's on the wrong call, this is your time to sign off, but let me just pause to make sure people can see it and hear me, and if there's any questions before I dig in.
Jeff, I don't see the slides. Does anybody else?
No, it's just a gray space.
Okay, well, that's important.
It's on our end either.
So, let me just do this. And I was trying to share just the application of PowerPoint, but let me just share the screen and what people see. Do you see a WebEx window or the PowerPoint?
WebEx window so far.
Okay. Let me just do this.
And here comes the PowerPoint. Yeah.
All right.
Thank you.
All right. Well, then let me check once again and make sure you see it, and then I can dig in.
I see it.
Great. Okay. Again, I'm Jeff with the North Central Climate Science Center. Geneva's been helping me with this solicitation. We're having the Q&A session now. Proposals are due September 1st, hoping to notify people by September 30th, and that was with respect to the fiscal year of the USGS, and if people are successful in the proposals they put together, they would know heading into FY17. Here is a graphic kind of with the fuzzy boundary that does make the North Central Climate Science Center footprint. We also kind of refer to it as the Missouri River Basin in general, but including the headwaters and up into sort of the northern Rockies. As you see, there's 4 LCCs that overlap with that footprint, and the idea is that we are hoping to more formally, through these liaison positions, establish connections with the landscape conservation cooperatives, and not only understand a little bit more about what the landscape conservation cooperatives are up to, but connect that with the work at the Climate Science Center as well as other USGS's capacity kind of on the topics of interest. This was the diagram for the North Central Climate Science Center's 5-year plan. We have foundational science areas shown in the middle of climate drivers, the impacts to species and ecosystems, and then how do we adapt or mitigate those impacts. So another way I've described this is the abiotic climate drivers, the biotic impacts on humans, and on the species and habitats of concern, and then the human, kind of what we do about that. So our foundational science areas are continuing to move forward, and we have some capacity in each of those. We have been working on setting up the Climate Science Center as a resource for vulnerability assessment, adaptation, and mitigation projects. So that's the acronym REVAMP. And in the first couple of years, started to configure and describe what that looks like, and then try to then utilize that resource as we move into the future. And so I think part of what these liaison positions are trying to do is bring the LCC priorities and or funded projects, and those are not always the same. The LCCs have things they like to do or are concerned about, but that doesn't necessarily mean they've funded a particular project, and we're looking to do both of those, the things they fund as well as other priorities, and see if our resources can be brought to bear on those. So here, I believe it's kind of cut and paste from the solicitation. I hope people had a chance to look at that. If not, it's posted on that RFP manager, and you can write to me or Geneva if you have trouble getting at the solicitation. But it's mainly focusing on communication between the landscape conservation cooperatives, those 4 I showed in the previous slide, and the CSC, and that we're trying to make a collaborative work between the two. You'll notice at the end of that solicitation is a specific role that each LCC called for from the liaison, whether it was on a steering committee, science advisory committee, or whatnot. It's described specifically at the end of the solicitation, and that's thanks to Geneva having quite a few conversations with the LCCs and then kind of figuring out what exactly they would look like, what they would expect from these liaisons in a specific role. A caveat is that this is not seed money to build bigger projects. It really is just establishing a representation and trying to leverage. So this isn't a $30,000 project this year to build a big $150,000 or $200,000 project the following year. It really is trying to just establish that connection and leverage off of projects at the CSC as well as the USGS other offices around the country. And the capacity just in general at USGS. So we're focusing on, again, kind of the engagement and communication. And the LCCs are bringing a lot of needs to bear, or needs kind of assessment that they are aware of. And so take advantage of that, what they've learned from the partners, and then what we can apply to those. Anyway, again, this is all cut and paste from the solicitation. So from our 5-year plan, the previous figure was from, this is from the, I would call it our R&D department, which is rip off and duplicate. We took the figure 1 from scanning the conservation horizons, which didn't have the green and blue outlines, but just had this 4-step process for vulnerability assessments, and said that in general, and there is an overlap between, but the CSCs and our university partners kind of can do the vulnerability assessments and management options, but the implementation as well as the identification of those issues are sort of more on the LCC side. And again, there's an overlap and a blur between those boundaries, but in general, we kind of saw the LCC sitting on more kind of leadership and connection with steps 1 and 4, and the CSCs being able to contribute more on the steps 2 and 3. And so, I guess the idea is we're still interested in that kind of framework, whereas I think there is more going on at USGS on vulnerability assessment and identifying management options that could be brought to bear, and this is kind of what we're hoping to kind of live into with this solicitation. So, what the kind of description of what we're facilitating here is kind of the LCCs, I think, can help us understand managers' needs. But, that said, I think there's some managers that are working directly with their long-established context at USGS centers. So, I think that it's not just the LCC telling us managers' need, but looking more broadly across USGS and where those managers' needs are, those trust relationships that have been built with scientists at USGS centers, can those plug into the LCCs as well? And then, kind of working across the CSCs and USGS to get the scientists and the science and the information to help meet those needs and kind of connect to that management process. Kind of the nuts and bolts of the solicitation, as far as, I wish it could be more, but we had to kind of keep this to about $30K per LCC covered. That was sort of based on kind of a roughly maybe 20 to 25% of someone's time. Seemed reasonable to do this liaison role, maybe with a little bit of funds for travel. We didn't want to be that explicit to say people could apply to have a quarter of their salary covered and $4,000 in travel, but rather wanted to make it open-ended. So if somebody has wants to put 10% of their time with another person putting 10% of their time, or there's kind of a small team and they've got current funding, but maybe they want to be kind of in the coordination framework set up through these liaisons. They could be part of a team proposal, leverage existing kind of resources and time that people have at their center. So we don't really want to limit it to any particular kind of framework of FTE and number of people, but rather we wanted to just say put out there 30,000, see if people were able to kind of what they might propose for that admittedly kind of small pot of money, but something better than just kind of asking people to volunteer to be liaisons. The proposals will be evaluated on kind of the experience, knowledge, and expertise of the person or team, how much it's leveraging USGS capacity, and for some insight, showing that the proposing person or team can understand that LCC that they're applying to work with, and then kind of the reasonableness of the budget. We also note that we have a university consortium meeting the week of October 11th. The exact details of that and agenda for that meeting are not yet known, but we had asked that the liaisons, or at least one person from the liaison team, plan to attend, and we can give you the detailed day or two that attendance would be requested. And again, we got background for each of the 4 LCCs in the solicitation. We'll be using the Request for Proposal Manager, or RFP Manager. The link is there. It's also posted in on the solicitation, and both Geneva and I are available to answer questions on this. So that covers most of the details what I was looking to go over. I asked maybe Geneva if there's something I glossed over or missed that you'd like to add, and then we can open it up to questions.
Thank you, Jeff, and everybody who had a chance to call in. I don't think I have anything explicit, but one thing I would say is that, we did outline specific, as Jeff mentioned, roles or ideas for each LCC, but what we are hoping and expecting is that people who are interested in this role, you may already have an ongoing relationship with a specific LCC, and that certainly, I don't want any limitations to be anybody to think that there are limitations based on what you might propose, depending on what you've been talking about already with an LCC, for example.
Yeah, agreed from my perspective too. So perhaps we'll open it up for questions. Thanks, Geneva, and I'd like to thank Geneva for all the work on kind of putting this together and the detailed conversations with the LCCs to see if this was the right thing, and indeed it seemed like well received by the LCCs and formulated to kind of meet what they expressed to us as needs. So let me open it up for questions if anyone on the call has any.
We had one. So this is Kathy Irvin, and I'm at NOROC. I had to think a minute with Todd Preston and Greg Peterson and Claudia. And we were just curious what you were envisioning for that line, the bullet about leveraging USGS capacity for 25%. Can you give us sort of an example of that, what you were thinking?
Sure. If there's, say, there's a list of, maybe in a proposal you could see taxon experts at a particular USGS office, and they are going to continue to work on what they're doing. They might not be part of this budget, but that this liaison person or team would sort of say that, as far as any LCC or management need related to these, say, X number of species that we have expertise on, we would be available to kind of communicate with those taxon experts and make sure that that work is recognized by the LCCs, and to the extent possible, the work could this liaison would help translate that work into the interest, or at least summarize that information to the LCCs. I think maybe, for example, if there's, NOROC has a lot of work on the wolves being reintroduced into Yellowstone. So just to say that, and there's a lot of stuff that the Northern Rockies and other centers have, whooping cranes in the northern prairies, and Fort has a lot of work, and the water science centers have a lot with the stream and stream-related habitats. So listing those kind of expertise at a given center, and in some way saying, you'd be able to tap into that expertise, and how you exactly tap in or how you translate that to LCC needs or connecting to that is, I guess, where we're looking for, the people writing the proposals to describe and to be clever, kind of with that. But to try to show that there's a capacity at a USGS center that team is connected to and can somehow bring that to bear. I don't know if that's vague and ambiguous enough to help at all.
May I expand on that, Jeff? And you can chime in if I go in the wrong direction.
Please do.
Okay, so one thing that I've been thinking about is, we have been very explicit. This is not a proposal for research or seed money, to submit a larger proposal necessarily. But one thing that I've been thinking of is that, we're emphasizing communication and connection between the CSC and the LCCs. And so one way I think of that, potentially leveraging USGS capacity, is that a particular person or team of persons communicates, with the LCC and the CSCs to understand needs and capacities respectively, and then maybe brings together a team to submit a proposal, a research proposal to LCC and or CSC funding opportunities as they arise, or other outside funding opportunities. So it's really leveraging a person's understanding of USGS capacity and LCC needs. So, Jeff, I'm hoping that this makes sense as an extension of what you were saying, that though this is, a $30K, that's really for somebody's time and thoughts and awareness, but to really look for opportunities to take that information and knowledge and understanding to the next level, to facilitate and promote science, and using the CSC as a resource to potentially get more work done to support management at the LCC level.
Okay, thank you.
Good, yeah, thanks, Geneva. That was, I think, a nice extension and similar to what I was trying to get at. So hopefully that answers the question. I think we're kind of looking for a foot kind of in both camps. You understand the USGS capacity and you understand the LCC capacity and needs, and trying to bring those together. Any other questions? I think what I didn't talk about was, and maybe it's clear enough, but we kind of had budgeted $30K per LCC, and we tried to word in there that people could apply to be a liaison or liaison team to more than one LCC, and therefore ask for more, the $60K if you're doing, say, Southern Rockies and Northern Rockies, or the Great Northern. So the budget is $30K, and we've got that. We've got $120K set aside, $30K per LCC, and it's up for proposal teams to think about doing one or more. But the teams or proposals are, that is an option.
Jeff, I've got a quick question. This is John Bradford with SBSC down in Flagstaff. I'm wondering what role you envision the LCC coordinator and science coordinators having in this selection process, and what's appropriate with respect to us engaging with them as we develop proposals.
They will be invited depending on their schedules and availability. I want to have at least one kind of representative from the 4 LCCs review the solicitations. I would encourage people to talk to them, interact with them, just so they don't feel uncomfortable. We're not asking for, or we're asking that no one include a letter of recommendation or a reference letter from the LCCs per se. Just because I think that with previous solicitations, people have felt kind of a little bit conflicted, and if they write one for one person, do they got to write it for another? So we've asked them not to write specific letters, but and on the other hand, this is internal to USGS. I hope that we're all trying to kind of do the best we can with as a USGS kind of team to help Department of Interior and other land managers. So I'm available for questions through the process, and I'd encourage you to talk to the LCCs or use your contacts that you have there and interact with them, to the extent that they're comfortable, and they'll all have their own kind of disposition. Do they want to help write the proposal? Probably not, but if they remain available to help craft it, that would seem to be anybody's kind of free to contact the LCCs, and so I think that's perfectly fair and probably will lead to better proposals.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe that makes sense to you as well. I think that's sort of
yeah, that makes complete sense to me.
Yeah. Good. Any other questions? I'm glad to see the interest. We got a handful of people on the call, so I'm hoping to kind of speak some.
Yeah, so if we submit a proposal that is trying to cover multiple LCCs, that kind of throw our hat into be covering all of them, or would it still be possible just to get one of the positions out of a multi-LCC proposal?
That is something I hadn't thought about. I would think that if your proposal, or at least the cover letter, sort of indicated that you are willing to do 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending on like what you lay out in a proposal. Let's say in the extreme you're going to do all 4 of them for 120K. If you're willing to step back and do something less than that, I would ask people to include that in their somehow in the proposal, communicate that to us, and especially if there's a subset that would be preferential. So maybe you want to do all 4, but if the proposal competition process limited that, or others came in that you'd prefer to do LCCs A, B, or C, or maybe prioritize what those ones would be. That's a good question. I'm afraid, sorry, I hadn't thought carefully enough about that. I don't know if, Geneva, if you want to comment on that, or if I answered the question kind of clearly enough.
I had not thought about that either, but Jeff, I do like your response. So as long as was that Todd asking that?
That was Geneva.
Okay, so does that make sense in terms of, say you proposed 4, but in the cover letter said that, this is the ranking of priority, or not that it's priority, but if fewer than 4 were to be covered in an award, then here's the list in order of preference that we'd like to be considered for, or something like that. I'm trying to think about it in the process of how we would be reviewing and then selecting. So, Jeff, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, and then so along those same lines, if we were going to go for multiple LCCs as a team, we would have 500 words for each LCC in each of those categories in the RFP?
That seems reasonable. I didn't explicitly say that, but I don't think we've explicitly said that in the solicitation, but that does make sense to me. Geneva, do you agree?
Yeah, you know what, I think, and again, I'm sort of speaking on the fly here, but, you know, if I envision a proposal that's addressing multiple LCCs, I think there may be some overarching strengths that would be demonstrated in the proposal. And so I guess I would say a maximum of 500 words per LCC addressed in a proposal, thinking that there might be some economy of language that's identifying why, you know, why an overarching multi-LCC proposal is beneficial.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like element 1, you know, that could be summed up pretty quickly and concise, but element 2 and element 3, you might need more if you're trying for multiple LCCs to kind of say how you're going to leverage across different LCCs and other experiences.
Yeah, that seems fair. Good question. Questions? Any other questions? Now's your chance, although Geneva and I, as indicated here, remain available and happy to answer questions as you dig into it. Something else might come up and happy to respond when they do. Okay, well maybe that is enough for now. And as I've mentioned, this will be recorded and posted on the North Central Climate Science Center's website for people to go back to or to forward to others if you have colleagues that are interested. I'll just pause one more time, see if there's anything else before we close. Okay, well with that, we'll sign off and appreciate the interest and yeah, look forward to seeing what people come up with and continued collaboration through this and other mechanisms between the Climate Science Center and our DOI partners.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye-bye.